Hi, Peter Charles here, Folks for Life Fly Fishing, and welcome to my vlog today on distance casting. And how I want to look at this is the bad reputation that distance casting has with some people, and I've never been quite sure why. It's been, kind of associated with that golf saying of drive for show, putt for dough. Well, yeah, presentation is very important, but if you can't get the fly to where it needs to go, it's like golf. If you can't drive, you're not going to have much of a score, are you? So, distance casting for fly fishers is important for a variety of reasons, and it isn't about showing off. If you have the ability to distance cast, for example, say single hand casting, and you've got a good double haul, and you can cast quite well without a haul, one of the biggest benefits from that really is low fatigue. You can go out and fish all day at normal distances and never get tired because your technique is good enough that you don't have to work hard. And because you're not working hard, you'll end up being more accurate. If the wind comes up and you're all of a sudden, like today, it's blowing quite well. I'm looking at the trees outside my window. If I was on a trout stream today with a dry fly, being able to cast 30 feet accurately and deal with that wind would be important, and distance casting is part of that. It's part of the technique you develop to be able to cast well over long distances, applies to shorter distances under bad conditions. So just being able to cast well for distance means that under other circumstances you can do a better job. When we're talking about two-handed casting, spey casting for example, I've had people say to me, well, you don't have to cast far to catch fish. Well, that depends on the river. My local river is fairly shallow and very wide. So the fish can be anywhere, and the runs can be 150 feet wide. So if you can't cast very far, you're not covering a lot of the fish. The fish could be scattered across that run. They're not necessarily going to be in a defined little slot. So if you can't cast very far, you will not catch as many fish as somebody who has the ability to cast far. As an example, I had that conversation with a fellow, and I asked him how many fish he caught. He hadn't caught a fish all season yet. And I said, you see me just caught those two? I said, those are on 120-foot casts. And the reason was, I was casting to a ridge, and I could reach that ridge. So when you're looking at distance casting, it gives you the ability to cover runs completely if they're very wide. Another reason involves cold weather. You want to be able to slow your presentation down. Well, you cast down at a sharp angle. If you can't cast very far, you're not covering much river. So if you can cast a long way, you can cover a lot of river with a very narrow angled cast, and you can still cover a decent degree of the run. And that way you can really slow your presentation down for cold weather. I think for me that's been one of the biggest advantages with distance casting, isn't going really far out across the run, but rather being able to get these options for my casting angles for when I'm swinging flies. I can choose to cast at a narrow angle and still cover a lot of the run. And the other thing is you can't hook up or you can't control the fish, blah, 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 blah. None of that's true. If you hook up a steelhead at 120 feet, no problem. You can set the hook. You can play the fish. This is no big deal. I mean, there are a lot of the reasons you hear for people saying, oh, you don't need to do that, simply are not valid. The proof of the pudding is out there. I mean, I've got video of me hooking fish on casts over 100 feet. It's no big deal. So you have the ability to cover more of the run. You have presentation choices when spey casting, when swinging flies. You can handle conditions better. When I've got dealing with a headwind, I can deal with it a lot better because I can cast far. If I could only cast 50, 60 feet and I'm dealing with a headwind, what kind of cast am I going to have? So even if I'm dropping back to 60 or 70 foot cast because of the wind, I'm still covering a decent amount of river. Another thing to think about, again, going back to that fatigue issue, is I see a lot of people out there with two-handers working way too hard to get 60 feet. So if they were able to cast for distance, and let's say they only needed to cast 60 feet, because that's all the size of the run was, well, a 60-foot cast is like, it's nothing. So no fatigue. These people are beating themselves up to cast 60 feet. And so once you've developed some distance casting capability, those shorter casts are nothing. You know, it's out there, it's fishing. So, you know, especially, you know, as we, a lot of us in this business are not young, and you don't want to be beating up your shoulders after a long day, because you won't be fishing for the next week. So the next time you hear somebody crapping on distance casting, keep these points in mind. And it's worth getting some instruction, learning how to distance cast properly. And distance casting isn't about power, it's about technique. People who cast well for distance cast very smoothly without a lot of effort. And that's the key. And once you've learned to do that, it opens up quite a spectrum of fly fishing to you. So give that a thought and give it a try. Cheers.